You are now listening to Protecting Your Nest with board-certified family medicine and obesity medicine specialist Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com. Welcome to Protecting Your Nest. I just want to say it's been a joy to share on a weekly basis the many ways we can all avoid the chronic medical conditions that we fear. We do this by better understanding the root causes of disease and using that knowledge to heal and prevent them. I am so thankful for all my guests for being willing to think outside the box. This gives us all the courage to consider approaches that maybe we would otherwise not have the courage to try. In fact, I consider all of them my superheroes, like the Black Panther providing inspiration for the citizens of Wakanda located in East Africa. We all need superheroes to encourage, lead, and guide us along our way. Like the strong Black women portrayed in the Black Panther movie, today I want to introduce you to another superhero, the Black Carnivore, Ede Fox. She is providing cover for so many who have been hiding in the shadows, for those who would hesitate to deviate from the cultural norms of dinner, where a starch, vegetable, and meat are the norm. For all of you still afraid to come out from hiding, no need to hide anymore. Ede is here. So with that, I want to introduce you to the Black Carnivore, Ede Fox. Welcome to Protecting Your Nest. How are you today?
I am great. And what an awesome, introduction. I really appreciate that. And it makes me think, oh my God, this person, this Black Carnivore sounds awesome.
That's right. And you
I
are
want to be
awesome.
your friend.
That's right. Well, guess what? I'm happy that we are friends. And I tell you, I definitely was inspired when I heard you for the first time on YouTube, when I saw you on Instagram, and now you're on Twitter now. So, hey, we got some work to do. And again, I'm happy that you're here to help guide us a little bit. So thank you, Ede, for that. And, I remember actually when I joined you on your YouTube channel, and you may remember me commenting before we began our discussion about the fact that you had kind of a golden glow. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, maybe that's what happens when you become a superhero. I don't know. But before our conversation, I remember seeing images of you, before that day. And I know it's possible to glow both on the inside and the outside. So I do, as I think about how we should start our conversation, I'm curious, before you became a carnivore, tell me a little bit about that person who maybe didn't have the same glow you have today. Who was that person, and what was it like to be back in that time when things weren't going so well? Maybe we can start with that.
Yeah, I think that's really a great question because, it's so important to recognize how good things are once you start to feel better. And that is one way to keep you focused on following the right path and not going back to those old days. So I do try to remind myself, what it was like. And, I remember the last summer before I finally decided I got to deal with my weight. I, I was just in a lot of pain. I remember I had plantar fasciitis. So the bottom of my feet hurt so much. And I just could not find a pair of shoes that was comfortable enough to wear. And my knees were hurting a lot too. So going up and down the stairs was really a challenge. And I live in New York City. I live in a walk up, and there are subways and all of that. So stairs were a regular part of my life. And it was really a challenge to go up and down the stairs. And it was like at the at the top of the staircase, and be like, oh, okay, I'm going down. Those were the things that were probably most playing on my mind. And then also, I just was really tired all the time. And, I mean, it was all I could do to like get up, go to work, come home and sit down again. And, and I live in the greatest city in the world, and there's always stuff going on, and there's lots of events and activities and friends to hang out with. And I felt like I just didn't have the energy for any of it. And, what's the point of living in the city and being here if I can't get up and enjoy it? So I finally decided to deal with my weight. And, I ended up on a ketogenic diet, which I had done before, many, many years before, but, felt successful with it. So I decided to go back to that. And that first week was so, so hard. Like, that is really branded into my brain. The keto flu, the sugar detox, all of that stuff was hit me really hard. And I definitely felt like that first week I was like, white knuckling it, just trying to get through. And I just kept telling myself, there weren't that many videos on YouTube. So, I'd watch a few videos and I'd just keep saying to myself, like, this is the right thing. This is what's going to help you. This is what's going to change, your health status in your life. And you just got to get through it. So I do know how hard it is, especially, in the beginning when people are like, man, this is not worth it. But if I and I'm so glad that I just stuck with it and had faith, because getting to the other side, the change was tremendous. Like, I never would have imagined feeling this much better than I did before. And if somebody had told me it, I don't know that I would have believed them. But experiencing it, I can see that that is the case. A 1,000% difference.
Yeah. Loving it, because I think, people who are not living that life, sometimes I think about, I had a patient, Tiffany, who did a testimonial. It's one of the testimonial videos I have on my website. And she tells the story about how she had to, climb these stairs. I think she was in college at the time. She was new. And in her story, she talks about how she was embarrassed not to climb the stairs with this new student that she went up the stairs with. But then when she got up the stairs, she was exhausted. And then she walks into this classroom for the very first time as a new student with all new students. And everybody's quiet because it's all new. And all people can hear is her breathing loud. I mean,
Oh
could you
no.
imagine? Could you
Yes.
imagine? So she says she'll never forget that moment. For the average person who doesn't struggle with weight, those moments never exist in their lives and they take it for granted. And yet for her, it's a moment she'll never forget. So just hearing you say aches and pains, you're not an old person, you're dealing with fatigue and, just basic life challenges that people don't think about. And I think that's why it's good to hear that voice of another person. So that's why I wanted to start with a question like that, because I know that as I talk to my patients, they share these moments of truths that really help them kind of wake up and say, I can't live like this anymore. So I'm also curious, when you think about life beyond that type of moment, like when you think about your friends and family in terms of how you interact with them, what's changed in terms of your family interactions? Is anything different? Is it the same? Are people inspired by you? Are they shocked by what you're doing? What could you say about that?
So one thing I wanted to add to the previous question about how I felt was also really not feeling able to focus and stay concentrated on the things that interested me, my passions, my hobbies, and so on. So that was really a challenge too. And that spilled over into my relationships, the things
Hmm.
that I was passionate about. It was hard to stay engaged. It was hard to spend time with family and do activities and things that we like to do. So it lowered the quality of every relationship not feeling well.
That makes
And
sense.
and it made me think, like, I was in the park maybe a couple weeks ago, and I ran into somebody that I hadn't seen in a couple of years, and we had worked together on well, I ran for public office in my community, and he had helped out on the campaign in 2017. So I used to see him all the time, and then I hadn't seen him for a long time, and so when I saw him, I was like, "Hey, how are you?" And the first thing he said is, "Oh, I'm tired." And I was like, "Wow, that's that's probably exactly what I would have said
Yeah.
in those days."
Yeah.
And I wanted to say to him, because he's somebody who suffers with allergies and asthma and all this stuff, and of course obesity, and I wanted to say, "Hey, I got a solution for you," but I have to be really careful about how I talk about this with people, because people are, of course, very sensitive about these things. But I have found that especially with friends and family, people just tend to shut down. They don't want to hear it, whatever.
Right.
Um, but in the beginning, when I was losing weight, in the first days, like, I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. And then later on, people started to notice I was losing weight, but maybe didn't say anything. And then as time went on, like, people really started to notice. And I worked for the city of New York at the time, and they have, all of these strict rules about, like, sexual harassment. So nobody says anything about anybody. Not even like, "Your blouse looks nice," nothing. You just don't say anything. But people were so, like, taken by my success, that people did start to say things like, "Wow, I mean, it's amazing, you look great," but that was totally out of the normal culture. So I could tell, like, it was dramatic enough that people were making comments and stuff, and it was and so at that point, people started to say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And and so then I'd start to talk about keto, and people be like, "No bread? No way, I can't do that."
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Well, hey, you haven't even listened to the whole thing." But yeah, people were pretty resistant. And then, as time goes on, and I've continued to keep the weight off and continue to, be healthy, I think people are getting more and more open to the idea. And then going carnivore, of course, everyone thought I was crazy, especially, my family and whatnot. And but now, years later, looking better than ever, feeling better than ever, and everybody else feeling worse.
Right.
They definitely are like, "Well, so what are you doing? Are you sure this isn't going to kill me?
Yeah.
Should I try it?"
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, when you start glowing and get your wings as a superhero, people have to notice. And I tell you, it's hard not. I mean, literally, again, I'm going back to that first interaction. I get on the YouTube with you. I'm like, why is this woman glowing? And I think that's what it was. So that's really cool. It's really, what I've learned and what I see you've learned is I just model for people. I just model what I have learned, and I can't go to family gatherings preaching to people, and when I see people, I can't just walk up to people and say I have a solution for you, because again, everybody's not ready. You want to do that, but what I find is that it's cleaner if you model for people, and then they will come to you, and then people will figure out this is what you do, this is what you're good at, and they will come to you. And I think that's what you're doing. Obviously, you're kind of doing it in a bigger way now. But in fact, one of the things that comes to mind right now is this idea of you being a voice for the carnivore community. It's not like a ton of voices, but how do you, perceive that role? And is it helping you to achieve a particular purpose? Like, what's the end game for you as it relates to your role as a supporter of the carnivore movement?
Well, I mean, I certainly take leadership very seriously. I think it really matters what what you say to people, and how you engage and structure a community, and the standards that are set within it. So that really does matter to me. But, as I said, I ran for public office. Working with groups of people and organizing people has been my job for decades now. So it's something that I like to do, and I take very seriously. And partly I take it so seriously because so many people are so ill and they are coming desperate for information. It's not like people are just like playing around on social media, like, oh, what shall I look to next? I mean, we're talking about people who have, very high blood pressure, diabetes or pre-diabetes, obesity. They're putting off, knee replacement surgery because they still need to lose some weight before they can go to it. There's all kinds of health issues that are looming or have arrived. So it's very serious why people are here and why they're listening. So I care about making sure that I speak the truth as I know it, and be honest with what I say, and recognize that what I say, people are going to listen to it, and so I need to be careful about what I say.
Yeah. There's a lot of thought that goes into every YouTube video, every podcast. And again, I don't want, I'm a busy guy. You're a busy person. And but you got to put stuff out there that at least at that moment in time, you feel will represent what you're wanting to say in a way that's authentic, but yet, as close to, as we would say in medicine, evidence-based as much as possible. So as you guide people, you can do it with a certain standard. So I do appreciate that. But you did speak of why there's so many people who are ill. So for those who are listening, let's dive a little bit into that. So many people listening do suffer from chronic medical conditions. And I know that for you personally, here, having heard your voice elsewhere, you have benefited tremendously as it relates to things in the allergy sphere. People who don't suffer from allergies, they really don't understand how miserable life can be with allergies. I've had only a few times in my life where I've had to deal with allergies. And on those days, I just dreaded it because you feel like you can't. Maybe you have to study like I was doing earlier today and you just can't do it because your eyes are itchy and you're sneezing. So I'm curious, as you reflect back on the allergic type things you've had to suffer through, what was it like back then? And what's changed since you've gone keto and carnivore?
Well, and so I've had an issue with allergies from day one. So my mom only told me not that long ago that when I was born, the doctors told her I was allergic to soy, although she didn't share that information with me for the next many decades. And I was like, that was super important information because in the 70s, like there was no talk of allergies. So if the doctor said it, like it had to have been very significant and serious. So,
It's amazing
so
that they
yeah,
actually knew that and figured that out, to be honest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They
Yeah.
told her not to use formula for me. That's
Interesting.
what they
Okay.
said. Yeah. So I was breastfed, so that was good. But eventually, I got on soy. Um, my parents gave me milk and stuff like that too as a kid. So I think one of the my parents were like into the whole hippie thing. So, and so were all of their friends and stuff. So one of the kids in the group ended up getting rickets. This was like back in the 70s before they started fortifying soy milk and other stuff like that. So, so that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore. But, we, so I was given milk, and I remember we always had wheatina for breakfast, which I hated with a passion. Yogurt and all these things. So now years later, I know none of that was good for me. And apparently, when I was very young, I used to get ear infections all the time, which is a suggestion that that's a problem with dairy again. So yeah, it was always an issue. And then as I got older, I had eczema. It wasn't very bad, and it wasn't really an issue, but it's just gotten worse and worse as I've gotten older. And I've gone through periods where I had really bad outbreaks that I just couldn't seem to manage or get under control. So and then also I guess I was like living on Sudafed for a long time, and always dealing with sinus infections, stuff like that. So that was really a pain. And I don't know if, I mean, anybody who's had a sinus headache, you know how awful that is. And it's just not, it's unrelenting. And there's nothing, that seems to relieve it except for Sudafed. And, and that's kind of what I've dealt with. So as I've gotten older, it's gotten worse. So between rashes, my eyes watering, sneezing, losing my sense of smell. I was allergic to dogs. My mom had a dog. So if I went over there, like I just had to make sure I just didn't touch my face at all. Because the moment I did, it was a wrap. My eyes would get all red. I'd start sneezing. It would be awful. And then asthma, that I had always had trouble breathing, but I never really got diagnosed until much later on. And then they said I had allergy-induced asthma. But by the last couple of years before I went carnivore, I was really having a lot of trouble breathing. And then finally, got on an inhaler, and I was using that a lot. And then when I went carnivore, 6 months or 4 months later, I also went, I gave up dairy, all dairy and all coffee. And that was a dramatic 100% reversal, like almost instantaneously. So it really made a difference for me to both be carnivore and then to take out the dairy and the coffee, I think.
Nice. I literally went to go get my notes because as many people who listen to me know, I am studying for nutrition and functional medicine, and we're dealing with the bacteria in the gut section. So we're doing some gastroenterology stuff, and everything you said rung a bell in terms of what I literally just studied today. So I'm going to share, I have my notes in front of me, and I just think that those listening are going to find this interesting. I'm not sure if you saw any of this as you did your own research. So here's some interesting facts. Shout out to University of Western States for making me a little smarter today. So anyway, I'm serious. I have to give them a shout out. So they probably would be a little upset I'm talking to a carnivore because they tend to lean towards a vegetarian approach, but that's another subject for another day. So check this out, Ede. This is one study showed that antibiotics use, before the age of 12 months, right? And it sounds like you had a lot of antibiotics because you kept getting infections. There was a 400% increase in asthma risk due to alterations in the gut microflora. So that's number one.
Wow.
400%. Oh my God. So, and then there's also a predisposition to eczema in babies who have certain bacteria. So, of course, you're going to alter the microflora when you have antibiotics. You pretty much, literally just get rid of all of it and start from scratch. And some hang on because they hold on to the lining and they survive, but then you have to kind of start all over again. So just that risk factor alone may have made an impact on you back in the day. And your parents are just doing a job. They're just trying to make sure their baby is okay. So they're making sure you get treated. The clinicians are doing their job based on what they know. But that just kind of blows my mind as I think about that as well. Here are a couple other things that I learned today. One is that if you have a C-section versus a vaginal birth, it matters because I delivered a lot of babies before I became I think I'm more of an adult medicine doc. I've delivered or been involved with 600 to 700 deliveries during my earlier days as a physician. And I can tell you many times when the baby's coming out, something else is coming out. You know what that something else is?
I think I can guess.
I think you can guess. Anybody listening who's been in a delivery, you're pushing. So everything you're pushing. So the bacteria from mom, from any remnants of stool, ends up in the baby but it's a good thing because it gives the baby who has a completely sterile gut some of the bacteria that the baby will need to be okay. But when you do a C-section, you don't get that. So what they find is that vaginal births tend to have better gut bacteria than those who have a C-section. I thought that was interesting. So, and these are just interesting questions. You can kind of dig back, and when you're trying to figure out why do I have problems, you can kind of go back and ask mom, if mom is still around, these types of questions. Another thing that was interesting in my notes from today is that if the mom takes the proton pump inhibitors for reflux, that can negatively affect the gut bacteria, therefore increasing the risk based on studies for the baby to get asthma and hay fever later. Who'd have known, right? That's insane.
Wow.
Another thing that was in the notes from today is that home births tend to have babies with better bacteria flora. Uh, Breastfed babies, for obvious reasons, tend to have better bacteria flora for the babies. And so all of these things can lead to asthma, allergies, and eczema, which it just blew my mind. So as you were talking, I just couldn't believe how what you were saying was connected to what I was learning. And having said that, we've all heard about leaky gut, and we can have an entire episode about leaky gut. But when you have a leaky gut, you tend to absorb larger proteins than you should, and that could lead to problems with allergies. So in other words, and part of the whole point of this whole Protecting Your Nest podcast is to say, well, what's the root cause? And if we understand the root cause, at least we'll have an idea of how to fix it. But I think for your purposes, it may just provide some clarity about why you may have some of the issues that you're suffering with. But it's just pretty amazing. And I think a carnivore diet will, for many people, allow for that gut to heal and repair itself. It's probably the best diet for autoimmune conditions and things like that, most of which occur because of a leaky gut. So I think it's just interesting. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is you mentioned aches and pains. And I've had one of the reasons why I'm doing keto and this type of eating is because I had some achy hands as well, which I don't really have as much now. And they found that when you have, they use the term dysbiosis, but when you have bacteria in your gut that don't serve you, it can increase your risk for things like rheumatoid arthritis as well. So there may even be a connection there as well, in that by doing carnivore, you'll kind of help to reduce your risk for that. So I just thought, again, I literally ran, to get my notes. Hope I wasn't missing a couple of seconds of what you were saying, but I just couldn't believe it. So I just wanted to share that with everybody listening, that there is a connection. But one thing that you mentioned, I know you mentioned soy, but I think in the past, I've also heard you mention cheese. Now, I'm not quite carnivore. I'm more of a keto guy, so I do still eat cheese. But man, not eating cheese, was that a difficult thing to give up for you?
Yes. I mean, I thought it was going to be really hard, and it was hard for a couple of days, and then I forgot about it. So, it wasn't that big a deal. But I haven't loved dairy, all my life. Like, even as a kid, I hated ice cream. I stopped drinking milk when I was 8. I refused to have it anymore. I didn't like yogurt. Like, I didn't like dairy, and I liked cheese, but only mild cheeses, like the stinky cheese, the hard cheeses, like that. That wasn't for me. As I
Gotcha.
got older, I developed more of an appreciation for other kinds of cheese, but cheese is really the only dairy that I had. I once went keto, and cheese I could only have so much before it upset my stomach. Once I went keto, like, the upset stomach didn't happen anymore. So I kind of thought, oh well, maybe cheese is okay with me. So I started eating more of it, and I had it all along. And and it didn't. I still lost weight. I still got healthier in some ways, but my breathing was still pretty bad. And so it wasn't until, so I went carnivore, and then a few months later, all these people had kept saying, cheese might be a problem, cheese might be a problem. And I kept saying, oh, it hasn't been a problem. I lost weight, I got healthier. But, I really do encourage people when I say like this food might be a problem, just test it, because there's really no way to know other than to test it. And you can't look at other people. No one else is a model for you. You just have to test it. So I did finally decide to test it. I took it out, and then I think maybe 10 days had gone by, and I was out, I was hungry, and my mom had bought these Parmesan cheese crisps, those crackers that are made
Oh
from
yeah, I love
Parmesan
those.
cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I had just a few. I mean, um, it wasn't even a full serving of them. And within an hour, I needed to use my inhaler, and I hadn't used my
Wow.
inhaler for the previous 10 days. So it was
Within an
like
hour. Within
dramatic.
an hour. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I did not want this to be true. So, of course, I decided, I needed to do intensive studying and do some more testing to make sure. And, and I kind of looked at I had some cheese. So I was like, basically, I've got, a pound of cheese and so many puffs left in my inhaler. So let's see, how this is going to work out. And and I tried it 4 more times, where I would have cheese, and then I would cut it out for a couple of days to kind of like get it out of my system, and then I'd go back and forth, and every time within a few hours I needed my inhaler. And the last time I had it at like dinner, and then later that night, like I had a late dinner, and I fell asleep, and then later that night I had dreamt that I needed my inhaler, and then I woke up and realized I needed my inhaler, and then it was like, oh man, this is dangerous. Like I can't do this anymore. So
That sounds fair. It's that's weird how those dreams work. I've had that happen many times. So yeah, I definitely can relate to that. So this is very interesting. I'm just thinking about your journey and how you've become the person you are today. And when I think about how you answer questions, as I was kind of looking at some of your previous interactions on your YouTube channel or your podcast, and you function like a clinical doctor person, and that you do, because I've heard you quote studies, right? So who how did you become that person? Because most lay people, whatever that means, don't quote studies when they're talking about the research they're doing. So how did you become this person who was able to kind of look at the science and make decisions based on what you were discovering?
well, I've always been curious about the human body and how it operates and functions. And in my former life, before I did politics, I was getting my PhD in anthropology.
Oh, there you
So yeah, yeah. So
That'll do it.
I have a research background, and
Cool.
just a natural curiosity about the human body. And in fact, I'm sure that's what got me interested in and open to a paleo or ketogenic diet. Back in the 90s, I was still in grad school then, and the Atkins book came out, and it was kind of all the rage for a while, so I started doing it. But I started looking at it and really kind of getting into the science of it, and thought it was really interesting. And then I think Lorraine Cordain came out with a book that was kind of about a paleo diet, essentially a low carb diet. And it was like, I don't know, sort of my first kind of academic kind of look at this diet. And so from then on, like I always kind of kept my ears open and paid attention and studied, or looked for studies, or any kind of information, even sort of ethnographies, to kind of get a sense of like what modern day hunter gatherers ate. I mean, I was always very curious about like what is the optimal human diet. And with all my struggles like maintaining my weight and health over the years, it was kind of like, I got to be doing something wrong. So what is the right thing? Like I'm willing to put aside like what all, the doctors and experts say. Like I just, what did human beings eat for, 100,000 years? Whatever that was, that's got to be the right thing to eat. But that's not such an easy answer to provide. And academia, like any, or anthropology, like any other area of study, is filtered through the lens of what people believe. So what people are looking for and what they're expecting to find is what you're going to
That's
find.
right.
And
That's
yeah,
it. Even
so
when
that,
yeah, that's it. That's how it goes. That's how the brain works, right?
yeah.
Yeah. That's fair. So, I was, and I do that even as I study nutrition with University of Western States. I'm coming from a low carb lens, and my instructor, who I learned this gastroenterology stuff from today, he came from kind of a, you can kind of tell when we talked about meat, he came from a more of a vegetarian lens. So he would say, okay, this study says this, however, it was always a however. So I think we all are biased, and we have to accept that that's what it is. And we have to be okay with that while being open to hearing different perspectives. And I was listening to, just yesterday, I was listening to one of your Black Carnivore Podcast episodes, and it was, I think, episode 7, maybe, and it talked about regenerative farming with your guest, Janae. And anybody who has no clue what regenerative farming is, please check out that episode in your podcast app. But in fact, I'll just share it. I'll share that in the show notes, like I try to do with things I mentioned. So my question to you, as I think about, you have at least 2 YouTube lives a week, or maybe 3, right?
Yeah,
You,
two lives a week.
2 lives a week. Then you're a podcast guest now. I mean, you're doing a podcast with me. You have your own podcast, right? So
Hmm.
you got to have a day job, I assume. So tell me a little bit. So what's your day? What do you do besides, being the Black Carnivore? What's your day job? What else do you do to keep yourself busy?
Well, I am a health and diet coach, so I help people to lose weight.
That's your job.
Yeah, yeah. I
Cool.
mean,
I did not know that.
I do like coaching people and helping them kind of think through what their behaviors are, what foods they're eating, and how that's impacting their ability to achieve their goals. So yeah, so those are definitely the kinds of questions that I ask people on a regular basis. So I'm
Okay.
sure if hear me interviewing, sometimes if the guest expresses some kind of challenge or obstacle, you'll hear me go through the questions like
Right.
that, yeah, that you might do if you were a coach. So
That's right. I love coaches. I think we should have life coaches. I think we should have coaches, obviously, when we're struggling with our weight. I think we should have relationship coaches. I mean, it's like, I think we all could benefit from that. And you can almost tell when you hear somebody that's being coached, particularly in relationships, they tend to see the world through a different lens. And we all need to be able to
mhm.
do that so we can grow. So I love that. So I guess as a coach, what advice would you give people, not just about diet, but balance, right? I just asked you a question about, how do you do all this stuff? So what do you tell people you're coaching about how to maintain balance in their lives?
Well, I am just now, starting to get a handle on that myself. And, I this world event that we are all living under now has
Yeah.
been, it has been obviously super, super hard and really difficult. But in some ways, it has given me a time to really be introspective and kind of figure out what I need and what I want. And I think that's important. And I think there are a lot of people that have taken this time to to reevaluate what they want out of life and what's important to have. So that's something that I've been doing over the past few months. And I I think too, what has been really helpful is a carnivore diet has been really helpful in helping me to kind of think about, um, to shift my mindset in terms of how I relate to my body. So, I think that very much in this society, particularly women, we're taught to eat less, to not consume as much, to eat lighter, to not have meat because it's masculine, it's for men,
Mhm.
um, and I feel like there's a lot of that kind of indoctrination in us, and also that what is good for you should feel bad. There's a certain asceticism in our society, and so I think that leads you to a place where you're not able to read your body signals. I mean, the way your body communicates with you is, if something is painful, stop. If it's if you feel bad, if it makes you feel bad, like stop. And if it makes you feel good, do it again.
Right,
And I think all of that gets really messed up with like what we tell ourselves. And so now, like eating, which is something that should be a good thing, becomes a bad thing. And there's
right.
all this baggage around eating, or eating a meal that you hate, like dried chicken, dried chicken breast on it, like a dry salad with like a splash of lemon juice, is
Ouch.
right. That's like the epitome of the healthiest thing you can eat, but it is so terrible that but we're trying to trick our bodies into thinking that that's good, when our bodies are like, no, that's not food, that's not what I
That's
want.
great. Love
So
it.
listening to my body and deciding that I'm going to listen to it and respond to its signals, and appropriately, every time, has really changed the way I relate to my body. And then on a broader scale, like how I relate to my life, like things should feel good. Like if they don't feel good, there's something wrong. And I need to reevaluate whether there's something I can change or adjust or what.
Nice. That's good coaching. I mean, it's so obvious we should think that way, and I think we've been fooled into thinking if something feels good for our body, then maybe it's taboo or bad. And what you're saying, as you coach people and you coach yourself, you're saying, if listen to your body. I like that advice. So let's do. I want to do one more coaching question since you're a coach. But I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I want you to close your eyes right now as you are listening to me. And when you close your eyes, I want you to go back to that person. How many pounds did you lose, Ade?
80.
80 pounds. That's a big number. So go back to that 80-pound uh, place and imagine how the world responded to you. Imagine what would be nice if it were different. And let me give you an example. If I have a clinic that doesn't have a chair big enough for a person to sit in, then I'm not really doing a great job as a clinician, providing a place where my patient who's not at their ideal weight can be comfortable. So when you think about the world we live in today, and you think about being back in that body where you had 80 extra pounds on you, what would you change about the world? What would you change about, it could be an airline, any place you can think of, any situation that you would want to be different, so that when you were at that weight before you started your journey, you would feel valued, respected, and okay before you took this journey to carnivore? What would you change as you think about that?
Wow. So it's what a huge question. um I
Yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
don't
Think about
know.
like what caused you pain back then that didn't necessarily have to be there, you
I
know?
mean, being able to sit, being able to sit. Yeah. I remember, actually, I can think of when I was on the subway, I always got up early before, like at the stop before. the coming stop because I needed time to gather my things and be able to stand up. My thigh muscles were just not that strong. So, just standing up unassisted without using a pole or something to help pull me up or to push myself up wasn't really possible. And so I couldn't just start off the train if I realized, oh, it's my stop.
Wow. That's just amazing. I just never would have to think about something like that. I mean, I just, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's, and to not have to do that anymore. You remind me of, Royzell Johnson. It was my second podcast, which was a patient testimonial. And he talked about, he's a barber, he's in Miami, and since he saw me, had lost 40 pounds. And he literally, he couldn't cut hair as a barber unless he had a stool. He just couldn't.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't even have a stool. And he said it's like a game changer. He says, so just little things like that are so significant, and it's just amazing. So I was just curious what would come to mind. That's a great story about a train ride.
I knew I was losing weight when, I was going to work one time and I was kind of late for a meeting. And so when the train arrived at the stop that I get off at, there's an escalator.
Mm-hmm.
But, people will stand on the right and then walk on the left. And so usually I would stand on the right. But as I was losing weight, like I just didn't really even think about it. And I had more of a desire to move. So I remember
Right.
on that particular day, I was late. And so I just ran up the escalator on the left side. And
Mm.
I passed somebody that I knew, and I was like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" And I kept going, and ran up the stairs, and then rushed on to my meeting, and then went into my meeting. But
Mm.
later in the day, I saw that person who I'd seen on the escalator, and they were like, "My God, like, what's happened to you? Running up the stairs? You've lost all this weight?" And it wasn't until then that I was like, "Wow, that's right.
Right.
I've never run up the stairs and been able to talk
Never,
while
ever.
doing it."
Wow. You'll never be the girl in college taking those, breathing in the back of the room. Those days are gone. I mean, I
Yeah,
think, yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it's just a great story. So thank you. And I'm sure somebody listening, been there, done that, can reflect on their moment when that happened. So, wow. So, man, I wonder if I gave you all the money and time in the world, would you do? You're doing great work. You're helping people. Your testimonies matter. So, if I gave you all the money I had in my pocket, in my bank, and I gave you all the time, you don't have to work anymore, would you do anything different? Is this the work you would do? Would you do more of something that you're not doing now?
yeah. I mean, I kind of have a great opportunity now to to do it, and yeah, I this is what I would be doing.
Yeah. I
I'm
figured.
starting up my Patreon page. I want to
Nice.
make a bit more content, so I will probably make things that are, for members only as well. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with a Patreon page. I just kind of started it. But the reason why I even think that's helpful is I have already been approached by industry, and I just don't think that's the right path. I think that if we can, you know, do this in a way where we are not biased by anybody, I think that's better. I'm not suggesting it's wrong or right. I just think that the more you move in that direction, the better, I think, because I think you have an audience, and the audience needs to hear this information. So hopefully that'll work out for you. And I do appreciate you doing that. So just a couple of more quick questions I have. I know you were inspired by Keto Carnivore on Twitter. Amber O'Hearn. Is it O'Hearn? And you introduced me
yeah.
to her. So was she one of the, it sounds like she was one of the first people to kind of inspire you about the whole movement. somebody that you follow, and what kind of things about her made you want to follow her?
Yeah, I actually had heard about carnivore years and years ago. It must have been like 2009 or maybe even 2008. And Charles Washington was the first person I'd come across, and he told his story about how he came to it eating this way,
Hmm.
and he had started a community. So I was part. It was like a forum, so I was part of the forum for a while, and and I kept reading it, but I just could not wrap my head around like no vegetables being healthy.
Right,
And like
right,
most people, I think that people often have sort of a negative view of Americans, but when we're told, "Hey, this is unhealthy, eat differently," like a lot of us did it. And so, even though there were times when I was like totally pigging out and eating junk food, like I generally made an effort to eat what I believe to be healthy food. And so listening to their forum, it was just hard to imagine like this was healthy. And then so over the years, I kept as I was coming back into keto, well, paleo and then keto. I would hear from time to time an interview with Amber O'Hearn where she would talk about eating this way. And she's a person that when you listen to her talk, I mean, is clearly very smart and thoughtful and just intelligent and very scientific in her approach. And so when I listened to her, I was like, well, if she finds something of value here, there's something of value here, even if I can't see it.
yeah,
And so I was willing to suspend, my judgment, from time to time when I would listen to her. And it was like in 2017 that I finally was like, I got to just try this. Like
hmm,
all the people talking about what should happen, why this should work, why this should be better. There's no way to know until you just try it.
yeah,
And I had taken out, almost all vegetables. I'm going to tell you a secret. The summer of my campaign, 2017, like I was doing a crazy amount of work, crazy amount of exercise. Like it was just, just running, being, a candidate is just a tremendous amount of work.
I
And
can imagine.
so I had started out the summer with the intention of, I was still doing keto, and I started eating. My favorite meal in the world, which was ground beef cooked with Rayo's spaghetti sauce. Like it's a very low carb spaghetti sauce.
Yeah,
And just mixing them together. So I started out by pouring that on top of steamed broccoli. And so the idea was like the broccoli would replace the pasta. And then
hmm,
eventually I just ate the bowl itself, and just forgot about the broccoli. So
that's
the
right.
entire summer, almost every single day, that's what I ate. And
Wow,
maybe some cheese on it, or maybe some sour cream, but that was what I ate. So I was almost carnivore, but
that's
not
right.
quite
In
there.
a way, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually,
But
you're
there
one of the
there
reasons
is a
I feel
big
more
difference
comfortable.
between.
Yeah, I feel more comfortable with carnivore because of the work you're doing and others. I mean, there are many days when I pretty much my lunch is carnivore big time. So I mean, even today I just had bacon, sausage, and eggs. I mean, yeah. So it's not that hard, and you feel less guilty about it because your whole life you grew up saying you have to have vegetables. So it's a tough. Even though we know carbs are not an essential nutrient, it's hard to let go of that when you've been taught that your entire life, that you need the phytonutrients, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
So I think I definitely benefited from, what I call my campaign meal, and that did a lot for me that summer. But when I finally in 2017 decided to go all of the way, I do want to stress that there really is a difference between being almost carnivore and carnivore.
yeah,
So it's up to you to decide how good you want to feel and whether some of these foods are causing enough of a problem to be worth it to try to remove them. But for some of us, it does actually really make a difference. And I will say even now, like I'm continuing to experiment. The asthma is gone. I haven't used my inhaler in several years. My allergies are more or less gone, but I still, deal with eczema, and that's something that kind of flares up and calms down. And so I continue to tweak my program. And the latest thing I've been doing, is actually been very restrictive, but I'm also seeing a lot of progress. So I think I need to give it 90 days before I really can tell, what kind of improvements, but, we'll see. So,
Yeah. I like that. We always talk about bio individuality, and I think any of us, rather we're, saying vegetarian or carnivore, we have to allow each individual to see what's best for them. So I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up our conversation before I ask you the question I ask everybody, which is, when you think about your journey moving forward, and we think about the nest and the rope, and of course, the nest represents nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep, and how we think and avoiding trauma. And the rope represents relationships, avoiding organisms, avoiding pollution, and protecting our emotions and making sure our life experiences serve us. So when you think about the nest and the rope, what do you think will be your focus over the next year?
I think that I continue to focus on the nutrition. It's surprising how complicated people can make a very simple,
Yeah,
um,
sounds simple,
very
right?
simple plan. Yeah,
Eating
yeah,
ground beef for lunch. What's hard about that?
yeah, yeah. So, I, as much as I would, like to expand the message and talk about a lot of different things, a lot of people ask me some very basic questions that show, I mean, I can tell which other influencers or experts they've been listening to. And I can tell the struggles that they're having because, because because of the choices that they're making. So I feel like I made a series of videos to try to just explain, just on the most simplest level, like what you need to do, what are common problems, and what you need to buy in order to make, this work, and be really simple. And then kind of help people to think about how they test, their own bodies, and how they pay attention to signals and signs, and respond to them. So often, like I said before, we're used to not responding to them, or just, taking some medicine to deal with the symptom, and not really kind of figuring out what the problem is. And so it takes a lot to kind of switch your brain around. And I think that there probably needs to be more support and a community for people to be able to do that. So I have a Facebook group. So I'm continuing to build that. We have a Zoom group coaching 3 times a week, and we support one another. We come in, and people have an opportunity to talk about what's been going on, how they've been eating, all that kind of stuff. I have a newsletter that I send out as well weekly with thoughts or things that are coming up, or sharing information. And well, by the time this comes out, hopefully my Patreon page will be, have some stuff
Active.
on it that might be of
Cool.
interest to you. Yeah.
Love it. And what's your handle on Twitter?
So I'm at Black_Carnivore. On
Gotcha. And then you're on
Instagram, I'm
Instagram.
at Black Carnivore.
Gotcha. So that's easy.
And
So
yeah.
so it'll be easy to find you. And I really I'm glad you found that that things are working out with that, because people can find you pretty easy, and I love it. So thank you for sharing a different perspective, and definitely appreciate you. I think we're going to be collaborating and doing a lot of good work in the future. So looking forward to all of that. So thank you for spending some time on protecting your nest today, Ede. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love your show, and I really appreciate, the work that you do, and thank you for finding value in my content, and sharing it with your audience. It means a lot to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And Wow. So today we were given the gift of thinking outside the box. And for some of you, carnivore will now be an experiment you'll be willing to try because now you have the courage because you have a superhero who's giving you a little guidance. And for some of you, it's just an opportunity to feel more comfortable so that when other people are considering carnivore, you won't look at them, kind of funny because now you understand that there are many benefits. Either way, I am so thankful for Ede Fox, the Black Carnivore, for supporting all those on the carnivore journey and for giving those suffering from chronic medical conditions like we discussed, whether it's allergies, asthma, eczema, maybe even a little arthritis, another path to healing. So if you decide from our conversation to ask your mom or even your dad questions about the birthing process, make sure to recognize, it's a nice academic exercise, but it's really important what you do today and moving forward. So that whole protecting your nest mindset is about understanding what you can do to prevent disease. And I guarantee you, if you protect your nest and follow those principles, you will have the right type of microbiota in your belly to protect you. So I think you'll all agree that, the potential of all of us to be superheroes is possible because what we do is we learn something and we share with the people around us. And guess what? They are looking at us as their superheroes. So, I just think that's a wonderful way of looking at the world and how I hope to look at it. So, and for those who want more content from the Black Carnivore, we're definitely going to have a conversation on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll go a little bit more into the carnivore diet and get some questions answered. So if you don't see it in the show notes when you watch this episode, it will eventually be there because we're going to probably do that episode the same day that the podcast is released. So I really appreciate all of you guys listening. And of course, until we meet again, be well and continue to protect your nest. You've been listening to Protecting Your Nest with Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com.